Today is May 6th. Welcome to the Charter Review Committee. A couple of things before we get started. A reminder to the group that when we're not speaking, sorry, but we have to wear our masks. So what I'm going to have to ask of you, kind of raise your hand. Bob and I will keep an eye out for your hands. Wait until I recognize first your hand, and then I'll recognize you. We'll then ask you to remove your mask, speak into the mic, bring the mic nice and close, and then when you're finished making your comment, if you'll put your masks back on. Sorry, but we've got to try to follow what the rules are. With that, I will call for an approval of the agenda that we have in front of us this evening. If there's a motion to approve that agenda.
So moved.
Phil Tillman, thank you. That's a motion. Is there a second? Tony, thank you. I saw your hand. Any comments on the agenda, changes? All those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
As best you can. Aye. Thank you. That's approved unanimously. Appreciate that. I just did the reminder on the face mask. Also, just a quick reminder on we're doing really well so far as a group when it comes to the open meetings rules. There have been a few email exchanges, but according to the interpretation of Mr. Wilbur, we are good provided those email exchanges don't become long, drawn out, and have 15 people involved. As we have all seen with the emails that have been exchanged, they tended to be short, tending to only involve maybe 1 or 2 or 3 comments. I have been monitoring them. Laura has been helping me, and so far we're good. So it's just sort of a reminder, though, that long email exchanges would be a violation, and so you can certainly answer any thought that has been put out by any other member of the committee. But then when it goes too far, we're going to cut it off, and then we'll bring it here into the meeting. So that's just a reminder of that. Again, we're doing a great job, but let's continue to be diligent. Next, I need an approval of the minutes of our April 22nd meeting. Thank you, Tony. Is there a second? Sonia, thank you. Any changes or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, we'll call to vote for approval of those minutes. All those in favor, please say or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Would like to give a shout out. I am sure that I see behind that mask that looks like Councilman Joe Holloway. Mr. Holloway, thank you for joining us. And Mr. Cannon, Councilman John Cannon, thank you so much for being here tonight. And over there in the left side, Councilman Josh Hastings. Thanks so much, Josh. Alyssa, that appears to be you. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming out. First, I'm going to turn to Mr. Wilbur, who has an update for us on the Compensation Review Commission. And recall that the group was thinking about moving that into year 1 of a new term, if you will. And Paul did some research in state law and is going to opine on that. Paul, please.
Okay. State law requires that within 15 days after the beginning of the 4th year of the term, that's when the Compensation Commission, by resolution, can submit their recommendations to the County Council. So what that means is really if the Compensation Commission was, say, convened sometime during the 3rd year and did their work, they then have to wait until 15 days after the beginning of the 4th year of the term to present it.
So the group had suggested, or I was a member of that compensation committee, that was one of its recommendations, and it looks like that recommendation runs counter to what state law is, so we can certainly leave it as is since we kind of can't make that change. I'll look to the group for nods or thoughts. Matt, yes, please.
These has to be reported within, they have to appoint the committee or report the results?
Report the result.
So is there any reason that we couldn't, 3 or 4 months before that, appoint the people to begin discussing it?
That would require a change in the charter.
Right. But
Yes.
we would still be complying with state law.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So does anybody, we can leave it as is, or we can make a, yes, Phil? Yes, sir.
Leave it as is, because
Okay.
the idea was to excuse the county council for having to raise their own salary.
Sure, that's right.
So if it's in the 4th year, it has to be, it has to be.
Sure. I'm okay with that. All right. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, also regarding compensation, we asked Mr. Wilbur to look into whether the Compensation Review Committee could add the compensation of the sheriff to its list of positions that it reviews. So, Paul, what did you find there?
Sure. The county council does set the salary of the sheriff. If the county council, and if this review committee wish to have the sheriff looked at by the compensation committee, that's legally acceptable if you wish it to.
So right now, the Compensation Review Committee looks at the compensation of the county executive and the members of the county council. It does not currently look at the office of sheriff. So if we wanted to change that, we would have to make a motion to do that. Or we can leave it as is. I'll look to the group, and if somebody wants to make a motion, now would be the time. Or we can have
I
discussion.
think we ought
on
to
it.
leave it alone, because we do the deputies as well, right? The sheriff and the deputies.
The sheriff and the chief
And the
deputy,
chief deputy, okay.
that can be set by the
Yeah.
county council.
All right, I'd leave it alone.
Other, yes,
I'll
Michelle.
second that. I'd say let's leave it alone.
So we would not be recommending that the Compensation Review Committee look at the sheriff's salary. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul, very much. Where I think we left off last time, everyone, we were in the neighborhood of Section 307 of Article 3. Yes, we're still in the legislative branch. So,
Mr.
yes, Bob,
Sorry.
yes, sir.
If possible, could we go out of order and maybe go backwards for just a couple minutes?
Where would you like to go?
We got a submission from Dr. Harry Basehart to the commission regarding redistricting. I don't know if everybody had a chance to see it or not. I'm sure everybody knows who Dr. Basehart is, but it's just for the record, Dr. Basehart's a professor, was, I guess, a professor of political science at Salisbury University for many, many years, long enough that he taught me, much to his regret, I'm sure. But we kind of went past this when we did this. As I said to Mr. Dunn tonight, I sent Dr. Basehart an email tonight. I haven't gotten a response back. But I'm not suggesting we should consider any changes, but I asked Dr. Basehart if he would consider perhaps drafting what he would recommend for changes. And the reason I did that is because it seems to me that if we have someone with his abilities, that we ought to take advantage of it and at least look at what his recommendations are. So I just, assuming the committee doesn't have any problem with it and Dr. Basehart's willing to do it, I would like to ask Dr. Basehart to consider actually providing us with a proposed change that he would recommend to Section 201. And not to do that tonight, obviously, but to have it come back when he has it available and take a look at it at that point.
I think that's a great idea. That seemed reasonable. We don't need a vote on that, but just some nods of the head. Great. Yes, Catherine, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I would concur with you as well. I would also like to go back to look at the possibility. I know we have the 5 districts and 2 at large. I'd also like to hear what he would have to say about the possibility of 7 districts. and even terms to appointments as well, or terms to offices.
I mean, I'd be open to hearing from I may not agree with Dr. Basehart and everything, but I certainly respect his opinion. And I think it would be a benefit to this committee to have his thoughts if he's willing to do that.
We'll certainly have that, we'll make that ask. Bob, again, has already written an email waiting for a response, so that's a nice idea. Speaking of that, I'm going to veer for just one moment. One of the things that strikes me is how we can kind of do our research in advance. We have 15 people here with 15 brains, and it strikes me that if we started to perhaps assign out some research on some topics that not overwhelming any one member, but I know Julie's done some real good research on some things. So I'm going to lay this on the table at the beginning. I'll ask you to think about it. Among the areas that I think we should perhaps have an individual member between meetings, take one task and look at how other counties are handling that particular item, then that committee member could report back on Hartford does this, Frederick does that, Baltimore does that, on the following areas. And they'll be coming up or they have come up. Personnel. Currently, personnel in Wicomico County lands under the responsibilities of the county council, and we will be discussing that. So that's an area, and if someone wanted to just do a simple, could probably do this in an hour, a Google search, and look up the other counties and where does personnel fall with, again, only those counties that have a county executive and a county council form of government. So personnel. Second one is, we might get to it tonight, hopefully we will, the language on the duties of the office of the county executive. And specifically, right now, we only have really one paragraph that describes the county executive as the CEO, if you will. So that's a second one. A third one, we've had this topic, we talked about it the last meeting. Does any county have any language on if and when there are violations of the charter that are seen by either the county council or by the county executive? Is there any action? Is there any recommendation, any course of action? And then the fourth one, again, that we discussed the last meeting, is the thought on the having a separate county council attorney. So not an as-needed county council attorney, but a full-time, as we currently have county council. So if anybody wants to volunteer for them now, you can raise your hand and say, I'll take this, I'll take that. Otherwise, I will attempt to circle back at the back end of this meeting and see if we can find 4 volunteers to take advantage and do some work in between the meetings. Okay? And maybe somebody can remind me to come back to these when we move forward. Okay. Now, thank you for that. And by the way, that's just my list. There may be other thoughts that the group might have that, hey, let's get one of our committee members to take a look at X, whatever X might be. And again, I think that can help us speed up the process and take advantage of the 15 brains that are assembled here as part of the Charter Review Committee. So with that, any questions or thoughts looking around? Thank you. With that, again, I think, and Bob, thank you for that Harry Basehart recommendation, great idea. So where I think we find ourselves is on section 307. Oh, I got 3 hands. Laura, I'm going to come to you first because you're probably going to correct me on something.
Yeah, so actually, I don't think we discussed section 306
Thank
on
you.
whether or not we should remove the word physical or
Yes, that's
physically
right.
present.
Thank you. That was one of the recommendations by the county council for us to look into. And Sonia, I think I saw your hand.
There were a lot of comments, and I don't know if we're going back, but we're going to have to go back at some point in time to talk about 305. Isn't that the one with the internal?
That was the one with the internal auditor,
Audit.
yes. the action we took at the last meeting was regarding the last line in 305F. I'm not sure what else is still on the table on 305, but I'll look to the group.
Okay, because I thought that we changed something else from it too when I was looking at the notes, but I will review it and see.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Julie, I saw your hand, I thought, and Laura took care of that. Great, thank you. So let us address 306. There was a recommendation, which was dealing with the removal of the word physically. In light of the pandemic, a quorum usually is 4 people physically present that would constitute a quorum. And this was a suggestion to remove the word physically. Before we go down that, I might ask either any of our 3 council members, you all, correct me if I'm wrong, you met either all virtually or all in person. Is that correct? Was there ever a time when a council member or 2 was not present and the rest of the council was present? Could anybody share any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you,
There were
Mr.
times when council members were on the Zoom meeting, and there were council members in the actual room itself.
And that was specific to the pandemic, correct?
Specifically,
During this
right.
pressure.
So
Thank you, Mr.
whether you think there needs to be a clause in there that says
Right.
that we need to make exceptions for extreme circumstances such as,
Sure.
state emergencies, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. So that's kind of covering the genesis of where the council was on 306. So what's the group think? Clearly, these were exceptional circumstances over the last year. Paul, are we in good legal territory here by what they were doing and by perhaps removing or adding a line that would remove that word physically present?
Well, it's like John just said, you could remove the word and add something to the effect of during a state of emergency, because otherwise you're going to open up a discussion about can people just participate by phone at all times, which is just a whole nother line to go down.
Okay, so how might, yeah, Bob, I'm sorry, you're right closest to me.
I looked at a number of different counties. I didn't see any other county that had the word physically in its charter.
Okay,
But on the other hand, I mean, most of the counties just defined what a quorum was. It didn't, I don't know whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, but most of the other counties just basically said you have to have 4 of the 7 that constitute a quorum, or 3 of the 5 that constitute a quorum, period. They certainly didn't put anything in there about physically being present. Now, how they handled the pandemic without the word physically in there, I don't know, and how they handle people calling in or willing to do it on that
Sure.
basis. I'm not sure how they do that, but I did not see any other charter that had the word physical in it,
Okay.
physically present.
okay. Would you like to make a motion?
I have some more
Let's,
discussion.
Julie?
Yes, the researcher.
Yes, I know, yep,
Has
we
come up.
appreciate that very
I
much.
didn't find anything in Maryland, but I did find something in Illinois that
Okay.
they do. Now, we can either do this or not. I'm just throwing it out there so we have a little bit more input. They came up with that there had to be 48 in order to have, to permit meetings without the physical presence of a quorum. They had several bullets. One is that 48 hours notice be given to the public, posted on the website, et cetera. They also said that the presiding officer in the meeting had to state why they were meeting that way, like emergency, pandemic, whatever. That they had to state that whether you were virtual or physically present, that you did count towards the quorum. That all votes were by roll call, so that people could hear and understand each other. That there be a verbatim record, either audio or video, of the meeting. And also that it shall be verified and must be able to hear one another and all discussion, no matter what. because often you have technical difficulties. And that's just how, that's the bullets that they had to have going into the future, not just pandemic, but if something happened to the building or whatever.
Okay, thank you. Good, thanks for the research. I'll look to the group. Is removing the word physical sufficient, or is going a little bit more elaborate, like the county in Illinois that Julie just cited? Do you want to go down that road? And I will, or we can leave it alone. And I will entertain a motion from anyone, or if not seeing a motion, we will leave it as is. Wayne, yes, sir.
Yeah, Mike, I would suggest that we do something along the lines of what Councilman Cannon has suggested, that we provide for the ability to have virtual attendance under exigent circumstances. We'd have to work on how we define that. Would it have to be a state of emergency declared by the governor? But I'm a little uncomfortable with going down the road of loosening up physical presence at meetings. When you have people attending virtually, let's go back to the Open Meetings Act. So you can have somebody attending virtually, they can mute themselves, and they can have other people in the room. Sure. And I think that's a slippery slope that we don't want to go down.
Thank you, Wayne. I like that idea, the state of emergency. Do we want to offer a motion now? Do you want to attempt to put verbiage together now, the group? Or do we want to work on verbiage and come back? I think it needs to be addressed. I think the council is correct in the fact that this last year showed that the world can turn on a dime, and they, to their credit, they reacted, and they're asking us for some relief here. So if anybody wants to put a motion, or yes, Matt?
My question would be, is there a legal definition of, quote, state of emergency, unquote?
I believe there is.
Probably so.
Yep.
Paul?
Yes, I believe there is. I think we would find that in state law.
State law. Then I would propose that we essentially insert that into this, into section 306.
Okay, so do you want to?
We would take out the word physically. So let's see, members established by this charter must be present to constitute a quorum, or is virtual now a legal term? Or virtually present if there's a declared, or if there's a state of emergency.
Is that a motion or is that a discussion?
Well, that's a motion.
Is there a second for that motion? We can at least put it on the floor and have a discussion. Phil, is that a second?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay.
And a question.
Okay, so it's a second, and now let's have discussion. Yes, sir.
I think what Matt is trying to say, you would actually leave the word physically in there and say you must be physically present to constitute a quorum unless, and then the rest of your sentence.
Yep.
I concur on that.
Was that you who said I concur?
Yes.
Unless there is a state of emergency in place that prohibits being physically present?
I would just add natural disaster, that also we can have a local hurricane or a local tornado touchdown that's not going to break off a state of emergency established by the governor. Something that would, again, that would affect the building, the water main.
So I'm assuming if there's okay. I don't think we need to go down the whole, if there's a pipe bursting in the building, yeah. I don't think we need to go down that road. So help me out, Sharon.
Question, is the state of emergency still declared by the executive?
Yeah,
Wayne?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can have a local emergency, you can have a statewide emergency.
That's by the local is the executive, and of course the governor.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the executive would have to declare a state of emergency in this case for the council. Okay.
He may not want to do it.
And he may not want to do that.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm just.
I don't think that's a level playing field.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Julie.
Could I suggest that?
Yes.
That perhaps Paul or Bob come back to us at the next meeting with some drafting
yes.
to give us something to chew on?
Yeah.
Yes. Is that
Refine
okay
it a
with the
bit.
group?
Yes.
Matt, I will ask you to withdraw your motion.
Withdrawn.
Thank you, and we will assign Paul and Bob to try to draft a sentence to add there that will cover where we are. Julie?
It's Maryland Code 14-107,
Thank
state
you.
of emergency by the governor.
So we could just do that unless okay. Thank you. Julie, if you'll pass that forward to Paul and/or Bob, that section, that would be great. No, I mean, I'm just trying to, unless Paul's taking notes.
14-107.
Thank
You
you.
can look it up
Thank you.
online.
Thank you. Good. We're all good. Thank you. Good discussion. Catherine?
And I would hesitate putting anything in there with virtual, because we're in the state of emergency for natural disasters or anything along those lines. We all lose our Wi-Fi, right? So just present.
Okay. Thank you. We'll come back on that. Thank you. We're doing section 307. We're doing section 308. We're doing section 309. 309B and C. Again, I'm looking around the room. Okay. We are at section 310 regarding sessions of the county council.
Mike?
Yes, Dallas?
So this is more of a question. At the end, it says that the councils, that they have.
What are you referencing, please?
Sorry.
What section?
Section 310,
Yep.
Part A.
Yes, thank you.
They're limited to 45 days, calendar days, and I don't understand why. And this is just, again, it's just a question. I would think that if council needs more time to address an issue, it just seems kind of arbitrary to say, oh, you're limited to 45 days. So what if they need 48, 50, whatever? I don't.
So this is talking about the total amount of legislative days that the county council can meet cannot exceed 45 days in a calendar year.
Yeah, and
You're just asking why?
Yeah, why? I mean,
I have no
it just
idea.
seems kind of arbitrary. And
It does seem arbitrary.
I would think give them as much time as they need to do their job, but I don't know if there's a reasoning behind the 45 days.
Nor do I.
Could that be a
Has it
function
ever
of-
been an issue?
Could that be a function of state law, Paul?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was trying to find stuff in the other sections, and unless I just missed it somewhere. I mean, in the example.
So
we
I might
provided.
suggest that if this had been a problem that any previous council had identified that
true.
we need more days, then somebody would have come forward and said, we need more days. And we've got 3 council members out there now. We're good at 45 days. I see heads nodding. I hear your point, Dallas, but I think
Okay.
it's not a problem. Let's not create one.
Yeah, no worries.
Great thought. 310B, Catherine, excuse me, thank you.
I don't mean to go back.
Yep.
But on section 305, maybe I was getting tired. I don't.
Well, we all were, it's all
Going
good.
through all of that there. But if we can go back to that, because there's still, one of my concerns was if there was an irregular audit or numbers weren't quite right, what would happen? Would the money be freezed in that department? There should be something that's done by our county executive to reevaluate what's going on with the money. Just feel there should be a clause in there somewhere.
Okay.
And maybe when we go possibly back to 305, like there was something we were missing in there.
Yeah, I still am not real clear on that either, but I don't know, I want to look at it more to come with specifics before, like, I want to come back to 305, if we could just wait and just move forward, is that?
So let me share with the group a conversation I had with Laura just beforehand. And Catherine, to your point, maybe I was tired or what have you. We come together every 2 weeks and we do our thing and we go home and then we regroup 2 weeks after the fact. And sometimes it's hard to I'll speak for myself. Sometimes it's hard to go home and remember, wow, what did we do? So Laura is going to, in the minutes, there's in bold the actions that we have taken. And Laura is going, she promised me it would be easy, therefore that's why she nodded and said yes. She's going to start keeping a running scorecard, if you will, for the group that's easily accessible. My plan for the group is once we have gone through the charter, we're then going to have that scorecard available to us. And I'm going to then go back and go, okay, here's what we have recommended. In section 203, we recommended this to make sure that we recall what we're doing and that we're comfortable with what we've done. So I think section 305, we could add in the research category, the Office of Internal Auditor. Sonia, if you or Catherine might want to be voluntold to do some research on the Internal Auditor section, maybe that would help the group. I'm not here to volunteer anybody anything, but we can come back to section 305 since we're still not sure where we've landed. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. I will add the internal auditor to the research task. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. We are in section 311 now, which is legislative procedures. That goes from letter A through letter G. Is there anything in there that anybody thought needed attention? All right. We will now go to section 312.
Sorry,
And-
Mike.
Yes,
Sorry,
Dallas.
that was a comment from the council. They said, from their notes that we received, says section 311, should the Open Meeting Act exemptions be added to this section?
I saw that and I had no idea what that question meant. Is there a member of the council here that, again, one of the questions that was relayed to us in Charter Section 11 was simply the following: legislative procedure, period. Should the Open Meeting Act exceptions be added to this section? And this section is called legislative procedure. Does that ring a bell with any council member who's present? Or Paul, excuse me, or anyone?
I
Yes.
think what might be intended is in paragraph 311A, it talks about council sessions shall be open to the public, and then there's 14 exceptions that are used for closed sessions. That may be what that's referring to.
Okay.
But those exceptions are a matter of state law.
Yeah,
We
they're
don't
all in
need
the
to
Open
retreat
Meetings
state
Act.
law in our charter.
So we're good?
Yeah.
I think we are.
In other words, it's covered,
Yeah.
okay?
I'm sorry,
No,
aren't
you're fine.
legislative sessions all open anyway?
Yes. Unless they need to go into.
No, I'm just saying, they don't have closed legislative sessions, do they?
No.
No.
Right.
They
And the
go into-
state, and the open meetings law
Correct.
applies to all government in the state of Maryland, so it already applies.
Right.
For the group, yes, the council can go into closed session, but not closed legislative session, right? We're clear on that? Okay. So thank you for bringing that up, Dallas. We will leave that, that question out there. On bond issues, Paul, again, you were getting some
Yeah.
thoughts from our bond counsel, the county's bond counsel.
Right. Lindsay Rader's the
Yes.
bond counsel, and she's promised to provide us with some revisions to legislative sections of the charter.
Okay.
And I would recommend waiting until we have those, and then everyone can look at them.
Okay, thank you. So is the group okay with that? We'll continue to skip past 313. Thank you. Yes, Laura?
Can we go back to section 311?
We can.
So the council also raised the issue as to whether or not, once legislation is passed, if we should be required to notify the county executive. There was a situation where legislation had passed, and the county executive's office assumed, it failed, but the county executive's office assumed that it passed. And there were some errors made because of that.
I don't know how that's possible. That's my reaction to that. So you're saying that there have been legislative bills passed by the county council that then were not made aware?
Were not passed.
The
They
bill
were not passed
actually
and assumed.
was
There was a
introduced,
piece
then
of
it
legislation
stopped.
up, and the county executive assumed it passed
Right.
and acted based on the assumption that it passed,
And the bill failed.
and the bill failed.
So the question is, should there be an overt notice to the county executive when a bill passes and when a bill doesn't pass?
Would that not be a function of the county council administrator? I'm asking.
We currently do not, no.
But couldn't the county council just adopt that as a procedure as opposed to putting it in the charter?
Correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
good.
Doesn't really need to be in the charter.
I think
Could attend the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, executive,
Maybe we could,
Phil?
maybe we could legislate that good common sense be on.
Thank you, that's where, we could strongly encourage the county council to notify the county executive of the passage of any legislation, and we could strongly encourage the office of the county executive or the county executive to pay attention to whether bills get passed. That's common. We're not going to put a charter change.
I don't think the public needs to vote on that.
I would agree that the public needs to vote on that. That doesn't need to vote. Thank you for bringing it up, Laura. I will hope that the three members of the county council present and a representative who still does some work for the county executive's office will make note of this. Tony.
On another subject, in 312, the petitions, 60 days I think is too short. You figure something gets passed, people are not happy with it, they talk about it for about 10 days probably, spend another 10 days talking about getting geared up, and before you know it, they just say the heck with it. It's not, I'd like to see it go to 90 days. It then sends the picture that you have 3 months to get it all together. If you can't do it in 3 months, then shame on you, but 2 months I think 60 days is too short, and that's just my own personal feeling.
Tony, would you like to make a motion on your personal feeling?
Yeah. Well, my personal feelings are I wish I was 20 years younger.
Well, is there a second on that?
No, because then my wife will give me more jobs to do. I would make a motion that in section 312B, that the time frame be changed from within 60 days to within 90 days.
Thank you. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
David, thank you. Let's have some discussion, if needed, on that motion.
I would simply ask that we check to see if there's anything in state law that precludes us from doing that.
So how about if we're going to act on the motion with the caveat that we will make sure that what we're doing, if we pass it, is appropriate within state law. Okay, thank you, Wayne. Julie?
What was amended in 2012 in that paragraph?
I don't know.
I just want to make sure that it didn't change from 30 to 60 or, that it's not
90 to 60 or 60 to 90.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. We can find out.
It's actually in our binder. If you look in the charter amendment resolutions, the section, the very last one, Resolution 131, 2012.
Can you do a quick recap of
And,
it
yeah.
for the group?
Section.
Good question, Julie.
So it does not address the 60 to 90 days. It
All right.
says, I mean, there's some changes to the language about 15% and some other stuff, but it does not address the 60 to 90.
Fair enough. Thank you. Discussions on the motion? I think it makes sense. Tony, I'll weigh in. I think it's a good idea. 60 to 90 days is sometimes you're right, it takes a little while for some thought to occur, and whether, giving an extra 30 days of thought one way or the other seems logical, is my thought. Bob, yes, sir?
If you're going to change section 312B, do you have to change section 311G
Good question, let's look.
and 311E because they all reference 60 days?
No, I don't have any problem.
I'm not sure that I see them as,
All public law, it'll take effect in 60 days, but it might not go to referendum for 90 days. I don't think it can take effect if there's still a potential referendum
Because it
period.
starts in 93.
I agree.
I see what you're saying, thank you, I'm now following
I suspect that's
that.
why the dates dovetailed.
I mean, the problem is if you change section A,
Right.
you also have to consider changing section B or C. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't do it, but if you're going to do it, you got to change it all.
I understand. That makes sense. Let's first act on, your point is well taken, and if we pass this motion, we will then go back and look at 311G.
Well, I would suggest that if we pass this motion, that maybe Mr. Sarbanes could amend his motion that if we pass the motion, that the 90 days be effective as to all other sections that relate to the time period.
I'm with you. Would you be willing to make,
Well, I really got something started.
Well,
Yeah, that's fine.
consistency, thank you.
Whatever you said is fine.
okay?
Mike?
So, yes, Wayne?
I'm concerned about extending the period of time for legislation to take effect from 60 to 90 days.
Yeah.
That's going to be problematic.
Yeah, no. Why can't they be separate? You pass the legislation, 60 days, it's effective. A petition to me is very different from legislation. Petition, you've passed this law, 60 days it goes into effect. People who see it's going to happen then have 90 days to petition. And you notice they've got to get 20% of the voters to sign it. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. I think we were saying to folks, if you really disagree with it, you got 3 months to get it done. If you can't do it in 3 months, then it's not worth it. 60 days is pretty quick to me to petition something. That's just me. Or we leave it alone.
Well,
Question.
Phil?
I hate to disagree with my grandfather over there. There have been several successful petition attempts in Wicomico County complying with the 60 days. So I think it's possible, if somebody feels strongly enough about it, they can get the signatures in 60 days. For instance, the petition to require the county to have collective bargaining with the deputies. That was a petition, and that was done very
Yeah, I'm
quickly.
just looking at the outside chance that way, if anybody were to complain, it would be easy to say, geez, you had 3 months, you couldn't get it together in 3 months. 2 months, they might say, I had to get whatever 20% of the people. That's the only reason I'm saying it. Otherwise, I'd leave it alone. But I would like to err toward those who may disagree and give them a chance. They have plenty of time. If they can't get it done in 3 months, 2 months, maybe fine. And yeah, you're right. It's been done in 2 months. You and I have seen it. But I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Paul?
There's a timing issue, I think, that I see. If it becomes effective after 60, and then the petition comes in at 90, there's a period when that law was effective,
Right.
and then it may not be effective, so it's...
I tell you what, I have a great idea. I withdraw my motion.
Well, can I ask a quick question real fast? So it says, the petitions have to be terminated within 60 days after enactment of the legislation. Does the enactment of the legislation happen when it is first passed, or you pass a law, 60 days later it goes into effect? What is the enactment date? The date it was passed or the day it went into effect?
At, say, second reading, it's passed, that's enactment.
Okay, so yeah, I agree.
Laura?
But for clarification, it doesn't go into effect until 60 days after the county executive signs the bill.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Was it, Blair, did you have a question
No,
or
I was just
comment?
agreeing with what she just said.
Are you withdrawing your
Yeah, I'll
motion?
take it out. It's-
Motion is withdrawn, excuse me. Back to, we had skipped over section 313. We are now on section 314. Thoughts? 314, 1, 2, and 3. Three different parts. And before we get Tony,
There's one thing that keeps popping up, I'm looking at 314, about how the council members can interact with people who may work for the county. And, you know, it says, in A, generally, neither the county council or any member shall attempt to supervise, direct, and all that. You know where I have a hang-up as you read through this thing is, let's say I was a councilman and I saw the man or woman who runs county roads and I wanted to ask them a question. It almost gets like, depending on the relationships, but if you have a bad relationship between exec and council, and I were to say to the county roads man or woman, you know, those are roads you've been looking at that you're widening, can you tell me the progress? The exec says you have no business talking to them. To me, that's downright stupid, but it happens. That's the reality. That happens. And I don't know how we rework that, but I don't know legally.
I'm gonna, I hear you. I don't see where 1, 2, or 3 says that you can't have a conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, it says, Sonia?
In these minutes from proposal summary, so if you look at number 9 in the summary, section 314, and you see, and I assume this is from the council, over the past few years, department heads were not allowed to attend. It kind of goes to what Tony was saying. We're not allowed to attend council meetings to discuss certain matters, and all communication had to go to the county executive's office, to the county employees. The committee should address concerns over council members having been denied access meetings or discussions with department heads and or staff on behalf of constituents. Perhaps a clear definition of what might be considered acceptable informal discussions would be necessary. It's just a comment that's in there because it is kind of relationship based. And I know how I am, that I get very stuck to the letter of the law the more that you come at me, so.
Thank you, Sonia. So,
I'm just saying it.
you know, I'm gonna, Wayne?
Mike, that's, having lived through that,
Sure.
that's a function of the relationships between the council members and the sitting executive. And I certainly believe that our county council members should have reasonable access to our department heads. I think not allowing that is really counterproductive. And it was very unfortunate. It put our department heads and our directors in a very awkward position, and it caused a great deal of dysfunction that was unnecessary. So again, I think any organization, the effectiveness of any organization has to do with the people who populate that organization. And we had trouble with that.
So maybe the best thing is leave it alone and hope they'll play bigger.
Well, and I'll go back to Phil's legislating common sense, right? You know, I think that, oh, hello, Mr. Holloway, I apologize. Yes, sir, please, I'm sorry.
This has been an issue, and
Yes.
like what Wayne said and Mr. Sarbanes said, you know, it depends on the relationship with the county executive between sometimes certain council members. I think if you were going to do anything, my understanding has always been, you know, you can talk to them and you can say, there's a pothole on this road, but you can't talk to them and say, go fix that pothole.
Right.
So you're not in a supervisory position as a council person. You know, the best thing, I've always had a good relationship with working with department heads. Sometimes it got strained through the executive's office a little bit. But I think if you're going to do anything, just make it clear that council members are not to supervise, place orders, in other words.
I think it says there, it's already in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Your point is well taken. Yes, thank you. So, yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. No.
Again, I went and looked at what some other counties have done. In Anne Arundel County, I think it's Anne Arundel County, they have a clause that starts out their section that says, unless for the purpose of inquiry or information. And then it follows that they can't interfere. So I don't know whether that terminology, and Mr. Wilbur might want to address that, whether those few words would clear this issue up and how that would be interpreted. But it's like six words, 7 words, unless for the purpose of inquiry or information, comma, they can't.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Frederick County has a section, and I don't think this does it, but they actually say you can't interfere. But then they have a specific section that says it shall be the duty of the executive to provide any information that is requested by the council or its members in writing for the purpose of introducing, evaluating legislation, or to engage in the review or monitoring of government programs, activities, and policy implementation. I don't know that we need to go that far, but that's what Frederick County did. But as I said, Anne Arundel just simply has this preliminary clause that may...
Would you mind reading that clause again?
Unless for the purpose of inquiry or information. I mean, it was section 314A, and take the word generally out, I guess, and you would put in, unless for the purpose of inquiry or information, neither the county council nor the members.
Would you like to make a
Again,
motion?
it's just a question of how you interpret those words, inquiry or information. But if the county attorney interprets that to mean that a county council person can call and say, is there work going to be done on X road, and that doesn't violate the charter, then it seems that would satisfy the issue.
Julie, I think I saw your hand.
I didn't know if you wanted to wait for discussion or if I could add my 2 cents now, which is proper procedure.
You can add your 2 cents now. We're having a discussion. There's no motion at the moment.
I've lived a negative situation through being on a director level where a council person approached me in all above board. It was above board, it was a question, just like, that there was no question about it. But the perception was that, was negative. It was negative in that they thought I was divulging economic development information to one council person over the other. It was not recorded, whatever, and it was told that the council acts as a body, and the body needs to have the same information at the same time in order to make decisions equally. And that I was not to, to be nice to everyone, but not to communicate directly with only one at a time because of that stipulation. And because of that, my dad used to say, make sure you keep your nose clean, or I had a boss tell me, you want to be above reproach, especially with confidentiality and things like that. So I like it the way it is.
Thank you. I see Councilman Hastings has stepped to the microphone. Please. Hi, Josh.
Hey, thank you all for being here.
Yes,
Appreciate it. I just want to point out, I think even in my interactions today, I feel like I'm often, as a council member, bringing information to the executive branch or to members of the, to the department heads or even the county executive's office as a whole. So I don't know the best way to tread that line, and I often, I've always been very cautious of not trying to tell someone what to do, but also to explain, here's what's happening, here's what here's the things to consider. And I've never felt good about that process, just so it said, you know, I always felt like, and of course this past county executive is a different situation, but it'd be nice if I didn't have that kind of a feeling where I didn't feel like I could bring information to the executive branch. At the same time, I think it's also important to note there's still no stick. There's still no, let's say a council member was interfering. There's still no, and you may have addressed this, I know you were going to address censure or other kind of issues like that. But right now, there's still no process to say, okay, well, that did happen, so then what? So if there's anything you can do to address that, that could be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Dallas?
Yeah, I just added my experience with those issues. As Councilman Holloway said, you know, when we would get calls in Public Works from council people, and even when things were going bad, you do your best to answer them. There's a pothole that needs to be fixed. Hey, there's somebody called me about this road. You just kind of wanted to know where the problems were at. So that level of communication between council people and department heads, or even onto the staff level, that was never really an issue, at least I can say on the Public Works side, that I felt that there was a challenge. There were some times that you would be called to give presentations to council on a maybe a more frequent basis than information was readily available. What I mean by that is, you know, hey, we want a meeting every month to talk about topic X and what progress you've made. And well, I need more time to address this. I need 2 months, 3 months before I can actually report on anything substantial. You have to get budgets together. You have to get contractors online. Cost estimates have to be developed. Scopes of work have to be developed, that type of thing. You know, you're writing grant proposals. You have to hear back from them. So to report back with any type of meat, you needed more time. But the impression was, hey, we want it now. Come up here and come up here and come up here again and again and again and again. And sometimes the executive would step in to help, you know, I'll say defend the department heads against a repeated being summoned, not from the sense of holding back information, but just in the sense of, guys, let's give these people a chance to do their jobs before we get them back up here when there's something actively to discuss or there has been some progress to actually report, then we'll bring you forward and talk about that. And I think sometimes that, hold on, let's get the information together, was perceived as, well, we're not making people available. And it was, you know, and again, this is just limited to the Public Works experience. I can't speak to economic development and things like that. But the routine calls of, hey, there's a problem, hey, this person's got a clogged storm drain, can you go take a look at it? Those day-to-day operations were never, you know, hand slapped for talking to council from the executive side and that type of thing.
Thank you, Dallas, for sharing that. Bob, yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, if it's appropriate, I'll make a motion that we amend section 314A, and we delete the word generally and insert in place the words unless for the purpose of inquiry or information.
Would you say that again?
In section 314A, delete the word generally and insert the words unless for purpose of inquiry or information in its place.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second for that?
I would second.
Catherine, second. Thank you. Now we'll have discussion on that. Hearing none, we'll call for a vote on that motion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. 314B, you know, Dallas is sort of what you're talking about, formal communications from the council, et cetera. I'm just going to share from where I sit that, you know, it's no secret that there was there were personality. This was a lot of what happened recently, and the examples that we're hearing. You know, just a rough mix, but it's people, right? At the end of the day, is kind of to Wayne's point. You build a team and you try to get the best people working together, and if everybody does their job appropriately, I think things can work in harmony a little bit. Section 315. I have a question about that. The initial appointment, now, I'm asking for the group, there are reappointments also that were a bit of a point of heartache recently. So this specifically talks, correct me if I'm wrong, that the initial appointment of person X to be the head of Department Y has to go before the county council. That's correct? What about where in the charter, and I apologize, is the reappointment of if the county executive wins another term and he wishes to keep person X in charge of Department Y, that person has to go forward for a reappointment. Is that correct?
That's in section 413.
We'll get to that. Okay. Do we need to address both of them at the same time? Or does the initial appointment stand and then we can address whether a reappointment is appropriate at that time?
I think maybe when we hit 413, talk
Fine.
about it, and then just make a note that at 413, if anything gets changed, we have to go back and modify 315.
All right, very good. Thank you for your help on that. Any thoughts? Yes, sir, Phil?
I would point out that if the county executive is reelected,
Yes.
the county council will be a new county council. Might have 1 new member, 5 new members. So to say that the reappointment would be automatic would be, I think, taking something away from that new council.
And
If you
again,
think about it.
right, we'll get to that right when we get to 413. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Dallas. Any thoughts on 315?
Can I?
Yes,
can
sir,
I-
Bob.
I mean, maybe we can get some clarification, or at least I need clarification. Historically, when the county executive hires the public works director, and it's the initial appointment, does the public works director immediately start work, or does he or she only start work after the county council votes on the confirmation?
The latter.
So I gather from this note that we got that didn't happen necessarily in the last 4 or 8 years.
Confirmation should be done before a person is hired, is sort of what you're,
Well,
and they don't,
I didn't think you had a job until you got confirmed.
You don't.
And if that's the way it's interpreted, I don't think it needs to be changed. If that's not the way it's interpreted, then maybe it needs to be clarified. But I thought that you didn't have it. I thought the county council put a name forward, but it didn't become official until the county council either voted or the time ran and they didn't vote. But there's a period of time after the name is put forward before he or she takes the position.
and I think that's what 315 currently says. Would you, the group, agree?
Yeah, was that ignored, however,
Yes.
somewhat? That people went to
Laura,
work
can
without
you
the
answer that?
confirmation?
Yes, we have had department heads hired by the former county executive without council's confirmation.
then
So
what do you
do we
do?
need to clean up the word hired? I'm asking the group, I'm asking Wayne, Laura, Paul, Bob, do we need to define what the word hired means?
I guess you could put a sentence in that says they can't take office until after the county council confirms them or doesn't act. I don't know why we need to do that,
I don't either.
but if that's the problem, then that's the way, I guess we add a sentence that says that you can't, it doesn't become official until it happens.
I think you just hit the nail on the head with why there needs to be language about what happens when you violate the charter, because this is
This happened, this was
this
a
happened,
bad.
and this is why there needs to be it, because it happened and there were no ramifications.
That's the real critical issue.
Yeah.
There has to be teeth in the charter to deal with willful violations of the provisions of the charter. And right now, we don't have that. The only remedy that you have is to go to court, and from a citizen's standpoint, a taxpayer standpoint, I think that's a pretty awful remedy.
Yes.
Sonia, thank you, Bob.
I just have a question though, even though it seems common sense that you would be confirmed before you start the job, honestly, where is it in A that says that? I see the last sentence that says if the council fails to act to confirm or reject within 45 days.
Yeah, just
but
above it.
Okay, so
Come up about 4 lines is county, let's see.
initial appointment of a deputy director. Where does it say that it needs to be confirmed before I start?
Yes, it says here, shall be subject to confirmation by county council.
But
And if they don't confirm, but they don't deny, then at the end of 45 days, it's approved.
So,
By default.
let me ask.
I mean,
Was
the
a-
problem is not with the language in the charter, the
That's what I'm
problem is it
wondering.
was abused.
Right.
And the
And
question is,
all
how
I'm
do you
saying
address
is
the
that
abuse?
if I wanted to not to abuse it, and you told me that it was going against the charter, I would ask you the same question. Where is it in the charter that it says that I have to wait? I understand what confirmation means. I understand it. But you asked about does the language need to be clarified, and I'm saying.
This might be,
If I don't want to do something, I'm going to start going to the letter of the law
Sure.
for it.
thanks, Laura, I saw your hand up.
I just want to mention that, council brings these issues up because these have been problems, and they're looking for clarity. You have the county executive's office interpreting the charter one way and the
Yes.
council office interpreting it something different.
Yes.
So we need something that's going to clarify exactly what the intent of these charter provisions say.
Thank you, Laura.
And
Sharon?
then I also want to mention, just real quick, Section 414 does allow the county executive to do temporary appointments.
Thank you, Laura. Sharon?
Well, Laura did the first part of my comment already, and the second part of it is to say that when this charter was drafted and written, there was already a government in place.
Yeah.
So there were already employees, department heads, all staff was there. So in order to confirm them, they were hired under the former charter. So when this was affected, those people were in place and had to be confirmed. So that's why it wasn't starting, there was no starting point for us. We kind of started in the
Right,
middle
right.
of an existence.
Right.
And that first group of people were confirmed that way, but they
Okay.
were already hired.
Right. So I'm going to, yes, Blair, yes, sir.
I'm just throwing this out. Would an option be to, at the end of the sentence, at the last word approved, add and then be hired or something to that effect?
You talking in A?
Yes, sir.
Then they would be considered hired?
Something along that effect, and then that should clarify that they're only going to be hired under that situation. And they would not be hired prior to that.
I think I'm gonna get back to that in a moment, and I'm gonna make sure that this group, and now I am officially speaking and gonna weigh in, because this last couple of minutes of conversation, hang on, Tony. This last couple of minutes of conversation, this is why we're here. The county government had some very serious discrepancies relative to interpretations of the charter. And that brought the function, I'm not casting blame, I'm not leveling criticism, I'm just trying to say that brought the function of county government to its knees. And the county council as a body, and I'm hearing from a member of the executive branch, they are literally asking us, Laura just said it, they are asking us to provide for them a better, stronger bit of language regarding some of these issues. That's a macro comment, but I want the group to understand that This is the crux. If we do nothing else correctly as a group, providing some clarity to the language, like where we are right now with what Blair just suggested and what Sonia was just suggesting, this is where we're going to earn all the money we're getting as volunteers for the Charter Review Committee. So I just want the group, we've got to land somewhere affirmative to help our government. I see all the hands, bear with me, to help the government recover from its recent period of being on its knees or being brought to its knees. Now, Catherine, I saw your hand, then Tony, I saw yours.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, what would your motion be?
And it's off of what you're saying, just changing the words just a little bit, that the final sentence, the appointment shall stand approved and employment may commence.
Say that again.
The final sentence, the appointment shall stand approved and employment may commence.
Or may then commence, perhaps.
You're referring to Part B of that, Catherine?
Part A.
Part A.
Say it again, Catherine.
The appointment shall stand approved and employment may commence.
I'll second that.
You mean once the,
Now, Catherine,
once the executive hires the person?
that, time out. Catherine, I'm going to ask you to hold that motion for a second. Because what I think you're addressing is if the council fails to act. But what about when the executive nominates the person? When does the job commence? So this is if the council does not act and fails to approve. That's valid what you're doing, but I think we're also trying to address when is the starting point for the beginning of the job. I got lots of hands up. Bear with me. Everybody, please. Thank you. Wayne.
Bear in mind, and Laura pointed this out in her comments, that Section 414 of the Charter gives the executive the authority to make temporary appointments not to exceed 90 days. So if you're going to change Section 315, you have to have wording added that indicates that it in no way impacts Section 414.
Understood. What? Tony?
I don't know. I look at it that, I guess I'm going back to my school days.
Okay, that's allowed.
Somebody could say, the superintendent could say, I'm going to recommend you to the board for employment. But until that happened, you weren't employed.
Correct.
Where it says they can appoint somebody, when you look at these departments, there are other people in there who can run it temporarily until the person he or she wants to be the boss can be voted on, because they have to be voted on. The worst thing is to tell somebody, you got the job, they go in there and the council fulfills its duties in 45 days and said, we turn them down.
Right.
So I think what they ought to have to do, they ought to wait until they are confirmed or not confirmed.
That's
That's
what I think we're trying to drive at. Bob?
I'm going to ask if the motion might be changed to add a sentence, something to this effect. An initial appointment hereunder should only be effective after the council acts to confirm the appointment or fails to act to confirm or reject the appointment. I know that's a lot of words, but I don't know how you do it in a much shorter time period and add clarity.
Can you attempt to repeat that?
An initial appointment hereunder shall only be effective after the council acts to confirm the appointment or fails to act to confirm or reject any appointment.
Okay.
That's a motion. Catherine, he's
Asking if she would amend her.
asking if you would amend you're now addressing the top half of this paragraph, it seems to me.
Correct.
Catherine's motion was dealing with the bottom half of the paragraph.
I might have
Dallas?
a little bit more succinct.
Okay.
I would just say that maybe it should say that, oh gosh, now I'm
All good.
I'll struggle with this first
Everybody
half.
take notes,
Yeah.
please. No, seriously, help me out. Thank you.
The appointments shall not receive compensation or benefits until confirmed by the council. I mean, because we had people that were just not put forward and then got paid.
No, we had people put forward who were rejected and stayed employed and got paid.
Yeah, so if we say, you make it very specific, you are not getting paid and you are not getting benefits if you are not confirmed by council. The other thing that I would just like to add too is, while this does stick to the heart of the struggle that we were facing, we still need to, big picture, say there needs to be a way to address when there's when there's that back and forth between council and executive, because while this was this specific issue to the last several years, who's to say the next executive doesn't find a way to do something wonky in another section that we're not able to anticipate? And that's why ultimately there has to be a way for these disputes to be resolved. I mean, I think it's great that we're addressing this, and I agree completely, but let's just not lose sight of, if we get this addressed, we're good. We still need to make sure that there's a way.
To quote Wayne, that there's teeth in the charter to deal with willful violations of the charter.
Yes.
If you will.
Yes.
We'll get to that.
Yes. And so my suggestion for the language is be that if you're not appointed, if you're not confirmed by the council, you don't receive compensation or benefits.
Unless you've been appointed under section 414.
Yeah.
Michelle, I'm going to come to you first, because
I'm just going to throw this out here. Yeah. Why have a person come in here who may or may not be appointed, whether it's with or without compensation? Why not have an acting person from that department fulfill that position until someone is appointed? Mm-hmm. That saves the person the stress and the distress of moving into a position and then, sorry, we don't want you.
Yeah.
That's what happened, though.
Wayne?
From a practical standpoint, and I'll put this out to the group, we assume that we have people in each department who can assume those responsibilities and duties, and we don't. Over the past 6 years, we churned 31 senior level employees. We have one department head still in place who started at the beginning of this 6-year term. One. We're on our 6th finance director. We're looking for our 5th public works director.
Then I would suggest that you take a closer look at who you're appointing, who you're hiring.
Yeah.
Because you need to find people that are stable, that are able to fill the position.
Well,
and it sounds to me like you're really not finding the people that are qualified or are willing to fulfill the position.
No, we're having people discharged from county service for political reasons, and we're hiring people who weren't competent.
So,
and we had people remain in place who weren't competent.
And when you have to go before, when you're a department head and you have to go up every 4 years and you're stuck between a council and executive that do not get along,
that's no fun.
that is no type of job security. You're not going to get quality people that come in and say, well, every 4 years I might get fired based off of whatever political struggle was going on. You're never going to get anybody that's going to come in here and stick long-term with that type of situation.
I'm coming to Catherine, then I'm coming to you, Matt.
Okay. I'd like to amend my motion. Bob, you're going to have to help me to add the verbiage of an initial appointment here under shall only be effective.
Well, I'm not, I mean,
but
you need to look at it a different way. I mean, what I'm hearing Mr. Baker say is that that potentially that would have simply been ignored and they would have put them in anyway. And he's saying that in order to get teeth to this, they can't get paid.
Correct.
Yeah. I understand what he's saying. I would hope we weren't there But I'm not sure why we have to do this at all, but maybe we need to go as extreme as what Mr. Baker's saying,
Well,
if that's literally the problem.
And that's where I wanted to add, after your sentence, add to what I had. The appointment shall stand approved and employment may commence with compensation and benefits unless appointed under section 414.
Right.
So that would add the piece, I think that would make everyone, I think it meets everyone's requests.
Bear with me. Okay. We're going to get this right. Hold on, Tony. Bear with me. I think we have a motion on the floor that, here's where we need a recorder. Who? I need, hey, everybody, come on, I need help.
Yeah.
So we're in, Matt?
Okay, I had what I thought was a fairly simple answer to this, and that would be reading the sentence, subject to confirmation by the county council, period. Okay? The county executive may then proceed to hire. And the reason I used the word may, which you also did, I like that word, is if for some reason, a legitimate reason, the county executive now decides, yeah, this got approved, but just the other day I learned something and I've decided there's a better person or I don't want to hire this person. That was, but that may not cover.
And department heads are at will, so they can be let go at any point.
Catherine and Bob.
Well, I mean, I think she's looking to me. My language was a new sentence at the end, an initial appointment hereunder should only be effective after the council acts to confirm the appointment or fails to act to confirm or reject any appointment. And then I believe she wanted to add the language that Dallas had at the end of that.
And employment may commence with compensation and benefits unless appointed under section 414.
There's a combination motion that I'm afraid this is where it gets complicated. We don't have a court stenographer here to do a read back, and I must confess that I'm not really following the full motion. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 2-minute break, and we got to stand up and get away from this table for a second. We're back in session. Thank you, everybody, for allowing a little bit of decompression time. What we're going to do, following a nice suggestion by Mr. Cannon and Bob and Wayne and Paul and myself. So we're going to land on a consensus for the language. And then we're going to have Paul work on that language, and we're going to come back to this. But here are the snippets that Paul is going, and also for full disclosure for the group, and I've asked, and I want the group to know that bear with me, for the next 1.5 minutes, I'm recording what I'm about to say so that we can try to land that to Paul, okay? All right. So, Paul, we're going to try to draft an amendment or some language here that takes into consideration the following things. From Catherine, a concept that end employment may commence with compensation and benefits unless appointed under section 414. From Bob, we have an initial appointment hereunder shall only be effective if blank, blank, blank. And then kind of where Dallas is getting down to the hire occurs when compensation and benefits kick in. And we want to try to find language that defines when the person is hired. We want to prevent a county executive hiring someone, putting them on the payroll, that person then not being approved by the county council, whomever the county council is and whomever the county executive is moving forward, we want to make sure that the language in section 315 brings some more clarity to how a person is hired, when the person becomes hired, where the council comes in, and when that person begins to get compensation and benefits. And perhaps as importantly, if violating that and a non-approved department head is on the payroll, what punitive measures could be put in place to correct that? Did I sum that up? And I'm going to turn this off now for everybody. Okay, that only took 2 minutes and 4 seconds to say all of that. Is the group okay with that? Bob, everybody?
One question, Mike.
Yes, Michelle.
Who would the punitive be directed at? The county executive?
To be determined, yeah, I mean, I think
Okay,
if,
that's,
right,
let's
if.
be clear who's going to receive the
No,
punitive
yes,
measures.
the person who is found to be in violation in hiring someone before he or she has been approved and has been put on a payroll, that's a bad thing. Wayne?
Yeah, I think when we had this discussion as a sidebar, I think we need to have a section of the charter that specifically addresses remedies to willful violations of the charter by either branch.
Yes.
So that's a potential new section to be determined where it goes.
Where it goes, yes.
Yep, understood. Okay. Thank you all very much for your patience with me as my brain is exploding and that we took that break. Great discussion. And again, we are, I think, I'm not certainly trying to speak for any members of the county council, and we appreciate their patience, but I think we're getting to the crux of one of the challenges that they're asking us to help remedy. We're now on section 315B, which is boards and commissions. All right, hey everybody, congratulations. We are on to the executive branch. Article 4. We are 401, 402.
402 has a note in it.
Okay, the note on 402, I will read for the group. Should a provision be added to require the county executive to provide any information that is requested by an individual county council member, which is for the purpose of introducing, as Bob was saying, introducing and evaluating legislation, or to engage in the review and monitoring of government programs, activities, and policy implementation. I think we sort of just had that discussion, right? Where do we need to do anything? Or we're in agreement that casual, as Mr. Holloway said, casual conversations, but this is also where Mr. Hastings is asking for a little clarity. I don't know how we provide clarity to that, but I'm certainly open to the group. I had a former life where I was a president of the Salisbury City Council, and when and if we needed to ask a question of a department head, we were certainly allowed to, yet at the same time understood that they don't work for us and they work for the mayor, and it was understood. But that's not clarity, probably. I don't know. So we're at section 402. I was thinking that this would be one of those research tasks if somebody wanted to volunteer on looking at the language of, that first paragraph, and is that enough? If anybody wanted to do some research into what other counties do and how they have defined the executive powers and duties. Otherwise, I will look to the group. Wayne? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mike, I would just make one point. In the first paragraph of section 402, next last sentence, it says, the county executive shall devote his full time to the duties of the office. we had a misstep in our search for a replacement county executive. And I think it needs to be clarified that the county executive shall have no secondary employment.
I don't disagree with that, but I mean, there's a section 609B that says all officers and employees in the executive or legislative branch, other than the county executive, members of the county council, the county attorney, county assistant county attorney, if any, who receive a salary or compensation paid in whole or in part from county funds, shall devote their entire time during the official working hours to the performance of their official duties. So the county executive is exempted in the same way a county council person is. So there's an inconsistency. If we're going to make the county executive a full-time position, or if it is a full-time position, he can't be exempt under 609B.
I'll second that by saying in my notes on that, my note says this implies the county executive is or can be part-time, was my note to myself. So I think I'm in agreement with what you're saying.
I mean, I'm just saying,
No.
if it's full-time, we need to change 609B, or we need to change 402 to make it not full-time.
So, Wayne, to your point, in the recent appointment process where a person who had a full-time job was appointed as the county executive, and then that person
Withdrew.
stepped aside within 3 days, does the group wish to spell out and address both this first paragraph and what Bob was mentioning, section 609B? Thoughts? Wayne, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
So your motion would add, the county executive shall devote her full time to the duties of the office and not have a second job? How would you like to word that?
Not be eligible for secondary employment.
Not be eligible? Anybody's eligible for it, but not accept.
Shall not partake in secondary employment.
Not partake in secondary employment.
I mean, it's clearly a full-time job.
Blair, I see your hand over there.
Just for clarification, how would you define that? Some people have their own part-time, some sort of business going, be it on eBay or something like that or whatever. Would that be considered as secondary employment?
That's a great point. I think, I don't know the answer to that. I'll look to the group. Catherine, you have your hand up. I apologize.
I would suggest that it be full-time during standard working hours or something in reference to that, because for how much the county executive gets paid, in all regards, I even work 2 jobs, and I am full force during the day for my primary position, but I have to work to keep going, so. But there be a full commitment during the 40-hour work week or something during normal operating hours or something.
Yeah.
The issue is, though, that the county executive's responsibilities aren't a 9-to-5 job.
Right.
It's 24/7, 365 days a year.
Correct.
And to your point about compensation, that's something that needs to be addressed.
So for the
Okay.
group's purposes, just to wear my other hat of the Compensation Review Committee, it was unanimous among that group 3 years ago that the current compensation of the county executive, which is $85,000 a year, was shamefully low, the lowest in the state by leaps and bounds. We made a recommendation to move it to $120,000 a year, and it was rejected immediately without really serious consideration. So, separate issue. Wayne, I'm going to say that I think the sentence as it stands, the county executive shall devote his full time to the duties of the office. I think that's sufficient. I might suggest. The last person who attempted to, he withdrew 3 days after accepting the job.
Yeah.
Julie.
How would a pension, like someone who retired who's receiving pension from the county, whatever be, that would be compensation, but it's not
It's
working.
not a job.
It's not
Right,
working.
that's right.
That's fine.
Matt, yes, sir.
What happens if you have an entrepreneur let's say, argument, let's say it's a family business. Dad and son and daughter are all in the business. Dad says, I want to run for county executive. Maybe he still owns a majority interest in that business. He may still receive compensation for that as part of his return on investment. But he could make the commitment and say, look, Bill and Judy are going to run the business. They're going to be able to call me once in a while if they have a question. We're going to have a board meeting once a month. But other than that, I'm full-time county executive. So there's some gray areas in there, and I don't know how you write that in there, but I can see it being that way.
So, again, it says full-time. We could go down this rabbit hole and we could be there a long time, I think.
Mike, one thing
Yes,
I see.
who's speaking? I'm sorry.
Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
One thing
Sorry.
one thing I see when you have a county executive with a second business or a personal business or any other type of job, you've always got to be looking at conflict of interest.
Sure.
And that should be the major concern.
Yeah.
You know, they could have something, but you have to be very careful
Yeah.
that you aren't going to get into that situation.
It's a great point.
Agreed.
Tony?
Well, I think Wayne summarized it well. They're on call every hour of the day.
Sure.
7 days a week.
Sure.
And, he ought to not, that's a sacrifice he's gonna have to make, he or she.
And
If they have a job, they're gonna give it up. They want to run for office, God bless them.
And yeah, and if he or she runs for office with another full-time job, that would be something that would come up during the campaign, right? That the voters could address. Dallas?
Yeah, so Wayne made a motion, and I would like to second the motion.
Okay, so that motion was to expand, shall devote his full time to the duties of the office and not partake in secondary employment. Is that a second on that motion?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion? All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to have to see hands. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's sufficient. The motion passes. All those opposed? No. I'll raise my hand as a no. That's 8 in favor, 3 against, and 4 people who didn't say anything. That's fine. So that motion carries.
Can I have a point of order?
Yes, sir, Blair.
My understanding was with the first meeting, we had discussed on how our votes would proceed.
Yes.
It was my impression that they would only proceed with recommending any changes if we had a consensus.
Yes.
I don't think it was just a simple majority. And when I went back and looked at the original, the first meeting minutes, I think we mentioned we would come back and touch on that, but I don't know that we ever did.
So I'll try to answer it from where I think we're coming from, is when we adopted Robert's Rules of Order, which allow for a simple majority to pass.
On some things, right?
Well, I thought on all things.
I'm seeing 2/3 vote on many items on here.
So I think in the very first meeting, before we had a chair and we were having open discussion, and please, this is just my recollection, help me out, that there was thought that in order to move anything into a question that might end up on a ballot, that there was discussion that it would need to be overwhelming consensus. Then when we held our first meeting with a chair, we adopted Robert's Rules of Order, and I took that to mean, and have been operating since, that a simple majority and that each vote would be recorded in the way Frederick County did, where, let's say, Section 401, the committee voted 8-7, 12-3 to change Section 401.
Okay.
Now, that's how I've been operating.
Okay.
Is that?
I understand what you're
Okay,
saying. That
yeah.
just wasn't my understanding.
Understood.
When
So
we went through it.
that's where we've been operating since we took our formal first vote on things, that all the votes, and Laura is recording them with the tally. And again, we're going to come back, remember, back to that scorecard sheet. We're going to come back, and when we review, we will include this passed unanimously, this passed 8-7, this passed 10-4. Clear?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And So what we're going to do, Bob has just reminded me that it is actually beyond quarter of, thank you, Bob. For the group, we are officially stopping at section 402. We just began in that opening paragraph. I will remind the group, if anybody wishes to volunteer on questions of personnel, on questions of language on the duties of the county executive, on language of charter violations, i.e. putting teeth, on the question of the county council attorney, and on the question of the internal auditor, let me know at some point. With that, our thanks to the public for being here. It's your opportunity, whomever may wish to speak. The microphone is yours. I see two non-elected members of the public here, but feel free, anybody take the mic. Thank you. Mr. Taylor, yes, sir.
Good evening, Robert Taylor, a concerned citizen. Excuse me. I'm going to skip over, I have a list of about a dozen things here, but I'll probably only hit 3 or 4. Regarding Professor Basehart's message that he sent and the decision to have him provide a draft of that particular section, I forget the number, having to do with redistricting. Just a couple of quick comments. One of his theorems or theses seems to be that Governor Hogan's executive order is pretty good, and I'm not here to debate it, but I am here to point out that it's an executive order. It could be changed by Governor Hogan tomorrow morning if he wanted to. And I think when you're talking about putting something in the charter, it's a different ball of wax because it can't be changed overnight. So that's one point to make. I think in his written message, he indicates that he feels that the redistricting commission's recommendation should automatically apply. I think that would be unlawful. And somebody might want to point that out to him and maybe look at it, but I believe under the Maryland Constitution and Code, that would not be possible. And I would point out that even under Governor Hogan's order, it still goes to the General Assembly. It doesn't automatically become the redistricting procedure. As far as composition is concerned, I think there could be some change there. And I've kind of kicked around just in my own mind different ways to do it. I've looked at the governor's executive order where he specifies specific numbers and political parties. Another way to do that would not perhaps put a numerical limit in, but would nevertheless provide diversity, would be to say, for example, that no more than, say, 40% of the members of the commission can be from a particular party. Essentially, I think we're talking about 2 parties, and if you used 40%, that would be a cap of 80, and then you'd have 20 that could be independent or some other party. So those are just some thoughts on that. You spent an awfully lot of time tonight on the appointments, the sections, and I forget the numbers. But I think you really did not focus directly on what the problem has been. And the problem has been, and it primarily relates, let's face it, to former Executive Culver. And it was really 2 different things. He appointed some people, never told the council about it. I'm talking now as department heads. And that's one thing, and there weren't too many on that. But then the other thing that he did not do was after he was reelected for his 2nd term, he didn't provide any further appointments. He turned in a list at one point and then withdrew it. He did appoint Mr. Strasburg and I believe Weston too, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And they were confirmed. What happened was, and this was about at the end of the situation with Culver, and I believe I was the one that actually recommended it, so I guess for whatever credit or blame, that the council, that is, not we, reappoint everyone who was serving that the council felt that should be reappointed, to essentially give them assurance that they would have continued employment and a job and salary. There was one, I think, that was not. So that really is the problem here. There was no real problem of any misunderstanding of the two sections that you've been discussing. And in fact, I think they're perfectly clear. I think if the law or the charter requires that somebody be confirmed to be a department head, that until they're confirmed, they're not entitled to be a department head, period. No money, no authority, no nothing. Now, after they get appointed and confirmed, certainly, then they're in. And I really don't think there'd be any question about that in court. Now, the change that's been proposed doesn't hurt, to make it absolutely crystal clear. I'm not saying don't do it, but I don't think it was really necessary, and it doesn't really address what the problem was and why this is a matter before you tonight. I think that's about all I've got to say this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Anyone else? Hello, Alyssa.
I just wanted to, Alyssa Hastings, I'm a resident of Wicomico County. I just wanted to jump up here and say thank you for all of you for spending so much time thinking about our county's charter. And I know it's thankless work and it's a lot of hours that you're volunteering, and I just wanted to say this is what good governance and good democracy looks like. So thank you all so much for taking the time to make our county even better in the future. So thank you so much.
Thanks for your kind words, Alyssa. Thank you.
Josh Hastings,
Yes,
County
sir.
Council, just wanted to say ditto.
Yes.
Couples that come to Charter Review Committee commissions together, stay together. My wife and I are.
We're going to work up the concept of date night.
Thank you all very much. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, Laura, do you know when our next meeting would be?
Yep, so the next meeting's going to be May the 20th at 6 p.m. in this room.
All right, thank you. Everybody, thank you. Be safe. Thanks for your time and robust discussion this evening. And we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
6 o'clock.